The kitchen faucet had been dripping for 3 weeks, and like everything else in my marriage, I was the only one who seemed to notice it needed fixing. I had my head under the sink, wrench in hand, when I heard Talia stumble through the front door at 2 in the morning. "Ethan?" Her voice was slurred, thick with alcohol and something else I couldn't quite place. Guilt, maybe, or just plain stupidity. "Under here," I called out, not bothering to move. The pipe fitting was being particularly stubborn, much like my wife's commitment to our marriage vows. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. She appeared in the doorway, swaying slightly. Her makeup was smeared, her blouse buttoned wrong, and her hair looked like she'd been rolling around in the back seat of someone's car, which, knowing what I was about to learn, wasn't far from the truth. "How was the work function?" I asked, my voice muffled by the cabinet. She laughed, actually laughed, a bitter, drunken sound that made me freeze. "Oh, it was educational," she said, kicking off her heels. "Very educational. You know what I learned, Ethan?" I pulled myself out from under the sink and looked at her. Really looked at her. My wife of 12 years, the woman I'd built a life with, was standing there with mascara streaked down her cheeks and a smirk that could cut glass. "What did you learn, Talia?" "I learned that life's too short to be married to someone boring." She swayed again, catching herself on the doorframe. "I learned that Brad Royce still knows how to make a woman feel alive, and I learned that your boss Dana has some very interesting ideas about team building." The wrench slipped from my hand and clattered to the floor. If my life was a sitcom, this would be the season finale. Too bad I wasn't laughing. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I slept with my ex-boyfriend tonight. And I'm saying Dana Bishop and I have been exploring some very non-corporate activities during our lunch meetings." She giggled, a sound that used to make me smile, but now made me want to punch something. "What are you going to do about it, boring Ethan?" I stood up slowly, wiping my hands on a dish towel. 12 years of marriage, and she drops this bomb like she's telling me what she had for lunch. "Nothing," I said quietly. "I'm not going to do anything about it." She looked disappointed, like she'd been hoping for a fight. Drama, emotion, something to justify what she'd done. "That's what I thought," she said, turning to leave. "That's exactly what I thought you'd say." After she stumbled upstairs, I sat at the kitchen table and stared at the broken faucet. Water dripped steadily into the sink, each drop echoing in the silence. My phone buzzed. A text from our neighbor, Mrs. Henderson. "Saw Talia with some man outside Murphy's bar tonight. Thought you should know." Attached was a blurry photo of my wife pressed against a brick wall, her tongue down some guy's throat. Brad Royce, no doubt. Her ex-boyfriend from college, now apparently her current side piece. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a notification from Talia's iPad, which was synced to her phone and sitting on the counter. A message from Brad appeared on the screen. "Can't wait to see you again tomorrow. Dana says she has some ideas for our next meeting." Dana. My boss. The woman who'd been giving me extra assignments and keeping me late while apparently keeping my wife even later. I picked up the iPad and scrolled through the messages. What I found there made my stomach turn simultaneously. Months of explicit conversations with Brad, flirty exchanges with Dana, plans for hotel meetings, jokes about my vanilla habits and boring personality. But the worst part? The receipts. Hotel receipts, restaurant bills, even a spa weekend, all charged to our joint credit card. She'd been using our money to fund her affairs. I screenshot everything, every message, every receipt, every photo. My hands were steady as I worked, my mind crystal clear for the first time in months. All those late nights she'd claimed were work functions, all those weekend conferences that seemed to multiply. All those times she'd come home smelling like someone else's cologne. By the time I was done documenting her betrayal, the sun was coming up. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table, planning. They wanted to play games? Fine. But they'd picked the wrong opponent. I'd spent 12 years being the reliable husband, the steady provider, the boring guy who fixed the faucets and paid the bills while his wife played house with her ex-boyfriend and my female boss. They thought I was predictable, safe, harmless. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The warehouse was buzzing with the usual morning chaos when I arrived at 7 sharp. Forklifts hummed, radios crackled, and the guys were already deep into their daily ritual of coffee and complaints. I'd been operations manager here for 8 years, and these men were more loyal to me than my own wife had ever been. "You look like hell, boss," said Tommy Martinez, my lead supervisor. He was a straight shooter, the kind of guy who'd give you the shirt off his back or punch you in the face, depending on what you deserved. "Long night," I said, settling into my office. Through the glass walls, I could see the warehouse floor stretching out below, organized chaos under fluorescent lights. This place made sense. It had rules. It had order. Unlike my marriage. My computer chimed with an email from Dana Bishop. Staff meeting at 10. Mandatory attendance. Even her emails sounded cold and corporate. Hard to believe this was the same woman who'd been sending my wife messages about exploring new territories. I spent the morning going through the motions, reviewing shipping schedules and inventory reports, but my mind was elsewhere. At 9:30, I grabbed my jacket and headed to Grizz's gym. The boxing gym was my sanctuary, a grimy temple of sweat and determination tucked between a pawn shop and a taco stand. Grizz Howard had been running the place for 30 years, training fighters and fixing broken men with equal skill. "You look like someone ran over your dog," Grizz said when he saw me. He was wrapping his hands, preparing for his daily workout despite being 60 years old and built like a fire hydrant. "Worse," I said, pulling on my gloves. "Someone ran over my marriage." I told him everything while we worked the heavy bag. Every punch punctuated another detail of Talia's betrayal. Grizz listened without judgment, occasionally grunting approval when I landed a particularly solid hit. "So, what are you going to do about it?" he asked when I finished. "I don't know. Divorce her, I guess. Start over." Grizz shook his head. "That's what they expect. That's the easy way out for them. They get to play the victim, say you abandoned them, couldn't handle a strong woman, whatever story makes them feel better." He held the bag steady while I threw a combination. "You want to hit back, don't swing wild, aim for the chin and the wallet, make it count." The staff meeting was everything I expected. Dana Bishop stood at the head of the conference table, her silver hair pulled back in a severe bun, her gray suit perfectly pressed. She was attractive in an ice queen sort of way, all sharp angles and calculated charm. "We need to discuss some personnel issues," she began, her eyes scanning the room. When they landed on me, I saw something flicker there. Guilt, concern, or just annoyance that I was still breathing. She droned on about productivity metrics and efficiency improvements, but I wasn't listening. I was studying her, looking for tells. The way she touched her neck when she mentioned team-building exercises. The slight flush when she talked about after-hours collaboration. After the meeting, she asked me to stay behind. "Ethan, I wanted to talk to you about your recent performance," she said, closing the door. "My performance has been excellent," I replied evenly. "Unless you're talking about a different kind of performance." Her face went pale. "I'm not sure what you mean." "I mean the kind of performance that happens in hotel rooms, the kind that involves my wife." For a moment, she looked like she might deny it. Then her shoulders sagged slightly. "It's not what you think," she said. "Really? Because what I think is that you've been screwing my wife while giving me extra work to keep me out of the way. What I think is that you've been using your position to manipulate both of us. So please, enlighten me. What is it exactly?" She straightened up, her corporate mask sliding back into place. "This conversation is inappropriate. If you have concerns about your marriage, I suggest you discuss them with your wife." "Oh, I plan to," I said, standing up. "I plan to discuss a lot of things with a lot of people." That evening, I followed Talia to Murphy's bar. She'd told me she was having dinner with her friend Nikki, but Nikki was nowhere to be seen when Talia slipped into a back booth with Brad Royce. Brad looked exactly like what he was, a middle-management pretty boy who'd peaked in college and spent the last 20 years trying to recapture his glory days. He had that artificial tan that screamed, "I spend too much on grooming products," and wore his shirt open one button too many. I watched them through the window for 20 minutes, my hands clenched into fists as he pawed at my wife like a teenager at prom. When they left together, I followed at a distance. The Starlight Motel was everything you'd expect from a place that rented rooms by the hour. Neon signs buzzed and flickered, casting everything in a sickly pink glow. Talia and Brad disappeared into room 237, and I sat in my car for exactly 30 minutes, letting my anger crystallize into something colder and more useful. Then I got to work. Brad's BMW was parked right outside their room, gleaming under the motel lights like a beacon of douchebag entitlement. I keyed "cheater" into the driver's side door, deep enough to require a full repaint. Then I loosened his license plate screws and swapped his front and back plates. The coup de grace was the rotten fish I'd picked up from the dumpster behind Red Lobster, carefully placed in his trunk through the fold-down back seat. I was finishing up when a security guard rounded the corner. "Hey, what are you doing there?" "Thank God you're here, officer," I said, straightening up and putting on my best concerned citizen voice. "I was just trying to help this poor guy. Looks like someone vandalized his car. Probably the same person who's been breaking into rooms. You might want to check 237. I heard some suspicious noises." The guard looked confused but nodded seriously. "Thanks for the tip, citizen. You should probably get out of here for your own safety." "Absolutely," I said, walking calmly back to my car. "Wouldn't want to get caught in the crossfire when you bust down that door." The next morning, I sent an anonymous email to HR from a burner account I'd set up. The subject line was "Inappropriate Workplace Relationships." The body contained screenshots of every message between Talia and Dana, along with hotel receipts and a detailed timeline of their business meetings. I also sent a separate package to Brad's wife, Jennifer, who I'd discovered through social media was 6 months pregnant with their first child. Poor woman deserved to know what kind of man she'd married before the baby arrived. By noon, the warehouse was buzzing with rumors. Dana's assistant, a bitter woman named Carol who'd been passed over for promotion one too many times, pulled me aside during lunch. "HR's investigating inappropriate conduct," she whispered conspiratorially. "Something about managers taking advantage of their positions. Dana's been in meetings all morning." I nodded sympathetically. "That's terrible. I hope whoever's involved gets what they deserve." "Oh, they will," Carol said with obvious satisfaction. "Trust me, they will." The next few days were a masterclass in watching rats abandon a sinking ship. Dana avoided eye contact during meetings, Talia barely spoke to me at home, and according to Tommy, Brad had been reassigned to the hopeless Midwest territory, effective immediately. But I wasn't done. Not even close. I'd spent my lunch break at the bank, quietly transferring our joint savings into a new account in my name only. Perfectly legal since I was a joint account holder. I also called our credit card company and reported the card stolen, freezing all activity. When they asked if I wanted to file a police report about the fraudulent charges, I said I'd consider it. The locksmith came while Talia was at work, professional, discreet, and completely legitimate since the house was in my name. I had him install new lock bolts on all the doors and gave him a generous tip for his discretion. Talia discovered the new locks when she came home that evening, her key suddenly useless in the front door. I watched through the window as she tried the back door, then the basement entrance, growing more frantic with each failed attempt. Finally, she pounded on the front door. "Ethan, open this door right now!" I took my time answering, making sure to activate the voice recorder on my phone before turning the lock bolt. "Hi, honey," I said pleasantly. "How was work?" "Don't you hi honey me. Why can't I get into my own house?" "Your house?" I raised an eyebrow. "That's interesting, because according to the deed, this is my house. You know, the house I bought before we got married. The one that's been in my name for 15 years? Her face went red. "We're married, I have rights." "You're absolutely right. You have the right to remain faithful to your husband. You have the right to not use our money to fund your affairs. You have the right to not sleep with my boss." I smiled. "How are you exercising those rights?" "You can't lock me out of my own home." "Watch me," I said, starting to close the door. "Wait." She stuck her foot in the doorway. "We need to talk about this. I made a mistake, okay? It didn't mean anything. Brad was just... and Dana was just... Just what? Just irresistible? Just worth destroying our marriage over?" I shook my head. "Save it, Talia. I heard your little speech the other night, the one about life being too short to be married to someone boring. Well, congratulations. You're about to find out how exciting life can be when you're not married to the boring guy who pays all the bills." "You're being ridiculous. This is exactly why I..." She caught herself, but it was too late. "Why you what? Why you decided to cheat? Go ahead, finish that thought. I'm recording, by the way, so make it good." Her eyes widened. "You're recording me? It's my property. I can record whoever I want. So please, continue explaining why your infidelity is somehow my fault. I'm sure a divorce lawyer would love to hear this." She deflated slightly. "Look, we can work this out. We can go to counseling. I'll stop seeing them. We can fix this." "Fix this?" I laughed, a sound with no humor in it. "Talia, you didn't break a vase. You didn't forget to pick up milk. You systematically betrayed our marriage with 2 different people while using our money to do it. There's no fixing this. There's only consequences." I closed the door and turned the lock bolt. She pounded on it for another 5 minutes before giving up. Through the window, I watched her get in her car and drive away, probably to stay with her friend Nikki. Speaking of Nikki, I'd been doing some research on Talia's best friend and confidant. Nikki Chen was a retail supervisor at a competing chain, ambitious to a fault and single by choice, according to her social media. She'd been encouraging Talia's behavior, liking every post about living your best life and not settling for less. What I found interesting was Nikki's employment history. She'd worked for our company 3 years ago in Dana's department before suddenly leaving for the competition. No explanation, no farewell party, just gone. A little digging revealed she'd filed a complaint with HR about workplace harassment before disappearing. The pieces were starting to form a picture, and I didn't like what I was seeing. The company's annual gala was scheduled for Friday night at the downtown Marriott. It was a big deal, with regional directors flying in from across the country, vendors schmoozing for contracts, and everyone dressed to the nines pretending to enjoy rubber chicken and corporate speeches. I'd originally planned to skip it, but circumstances had changed. I had a message to deliver, and I wanted the biggest possible audience. I rented a tux and spent the afternoon preparing. Not just my appearance, but my presentation. I loaded all of Talia and Dana's messages onto a tablet, organized by date and severity. I practiced my speech in the mirror until I could deliver it without notes. The ballroom was packed when I arrived. I spotted Talia immediately, stunning in a red dress that probably cost more than most people's rent. She was working the room with Dana, both of them networking like their careers depended on it, which, as it turned out, they did. I grabbed a whiskey and positioned myself near the bar, watching and waiting. Regional Director Mike Patterson was holding court near the stage, surrounded by local managers and their spouses. Perfect. I waited until the cocktail hour was winding down and people were finding their seats for dinner. Then I made my move. "Excuse me, Mr. Patterson," I said, approaching the group with my tablet in hand. "I'm Ethan Caro, Operations Manager for the South District. I have something I think you should see." "Of course, Ethan. Dana speaks very highly of you." "That's interesting," I said, loud enough for the surrounding tables to hear, "because Dana's been speaking very highly of my wife, too. In fact, she's been speaking to my wife in ways that might surprise you." I handed him the tablet, opened to one of the more explicit message chains. His face went from confusion to shock to anger in about 10 seconds. "What is this?" "That's my boss, Dana Bishop, engaging in an inappropriate relationship with my wife, Talia, using company time, company resources, and company events to facilitate their affair." I raised my voice slightly. "The same wife who's been sleeping with Brad Royce, who was mysteriously reassigned this week." The room was starting to take notice. Conversations faded as people turned to listen. I saw Talia's face go white across the room. "This is highly inappropriate," Patterson said, but he kept scrolling through the messages. "You're absolutely right," I agreed. "It is highly inappropriate for managers to abuse their positions to manipulate employees' personal lives. It's inappropriate to use company credit cards for personal hotel stays, and it's definitely inappropriate to create hostile work environments through favoritism." Dana appeared at my elbow, her face a mask of controlled panic. "Mr. Patterson, this man is clearly having some kind of breakdown. His personal problems have nothing to do with— Actually, they have everything to do with company policy," I interrupted. "Section 4.7 of the Employee Handbook specifically prohibits romantic relationships between supervisors and subordinates. Section 8.3 prohibits the use of company resources for personal activities, and Section 12.1 requires disclosure of any conflicts of interest." I'd memorized the Employee Handbook the night before. Know your enemy's rules better than they do. Talia was pushing through the crowd now, her face flushed with embarrassment and anger. "Ethan, stop this. You're making a scene." "Am I?" I looked around at the crowd of onlookers, many of them holding up phones to record the drama. "I thought I was just sharing some interesting information about corporate teamwork. You know, the kind of teamwork that happens in hotel rooms." "You bastard!" she hissed. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, raising my voice and my glass, "I'd like to propose a toast to partnerships. May they last longer than a hotel stay and cost less than a marriage." The room erupted. Some people laughed, others gasped, and more than a few applauded. Security was pushing through the crowd, probably called by Dana, but the damage was done. Patterson grabbed my arm. "We need to talk. Now." "Absolutely," I said. "I have a lot more to share." As security escorted me out, I caught sight of Talia and Dana huddled together near the emergency exit, their careers and reputations crumbling around them in real time. Brad's wife Jennifer was there too, having apparently received my anonymous care package right on schedule. The last thing I heard before the ballroom doors closed was Jennifer Royce screaming at the top of her lungs, "Where is that cheating piece of garbage? Where is Brad?" The fallout from the gala was swift and brutal. By Monday morning, both Dana and Talia were suspended pending a full HR investigation. Brad had been demoted and transferred to the Fargo office, which in corporate terms was basically Siberia. His wife had filed for divorce and taken out a restraining order, all while 6 months pregnant. I should have felt satisfied. Mission accomplished, right? But something was nagging at me, a loose thread that didn't fit the pattern. Nikki Chen. I'd been thinking about Talia's best friend and her sudden departure from our company 3 years ago, the harassment complaint, the way she'd been encouraging Talia's behavior, the Instagram posts about boring husbands and hot promotions. So I called in a favor from an old boxing buddy who'd gone into private investigation after leaving the police force. Danny Kowalski was the kind of guy who could find dirt on a saint and had the discretion to keep quiet about where it came from. "What do you need, Ethan?" he asked when we met at a diner on the outskirts of town. "Background check on Nicole Chen. Goes by Nikki. Works for Retail Solutions, Inc. Lives on Maple Street. I need to know everything about her employment history, her finances, and her connection to my wife's situation. Danny raised an eyebrow. This about your marriage troubles? It's about finishing what I started. 3 days later, Danny handed me a thick folder over coffee and eggs. Your instincts were right, he said. Nikki Chen is dirty. She was fired from your company for corporate espionage, not harassment. She'd been feeding information to competitors, using her relationship with Dana Bishop to access sensitive data. What kind of relationship? The intimate kind. Dana and Nikki were involved for about 6 months before Nikki got greedy and started selling trade secrets. When Dana found out, she had to choose between covering for her girlfriend or saving her own career. The pieces clicked into place. So Dana threw her under the bus. Exactly. But here's where it gets interesting. Nikki's been planning her revenge ever since. She cultivated a friendship with your wife specifically because Talia worked in retail and was married to someone in Dana's department. I felt my pressure rising. She set this whole thing up. Gets better. Nikki's been blackmailing Dana for the past year, threatening to expose their old relationship unless Dana played along with her scheme. The affair with your wife? That was Nikki's idea. She wanted to destroy Dana's career and your marriage as payback. What about Brad? Useful idiot. Nikki knew he'd been sniffing around Talia at company events, so she encouraged your wife to reconnect with him. 2 affairs are more scandalous than one, and she figured you'd eventually find out and cause exactly the kind of scene you caused at the gala. I stared at the surveillance photos Danny had taken. Nikki meeting with Dana in parking lots. Nikki and Talia at lunch, heads together in conspiratorial whispers. Nikki at a bar with a man Danny had identified as a competitor's regional manager. She played everyone, I said. Like a violin. Your wife, your boss, even you. She wanted chaos, and she got it. Not yet, I said, closing the folder. But she's about to. That evening, I followed Nikki to Martini's, an upscale bar downtown where young professionals went to see and be seen. She was holding court at a corner table, regaling a group of admirers with what I assumed were war stories about corporate drama. I waited until her audience dispersed, then approached her table. Nikki Chen, right? I'm Ethan Caro, Talia's husband. She looked up with mock sympathy. Oh, Ethan, I'm so sorry about everything that's happened. Talia's been staying with me, you know. She's devastated about how things turned out. I bet she is, I said, sliding into the seat across from her. Mind if I join you? I have some questions about your friendship with my wife. Of course. Though I should warn you, I'm very loyal to my friends. That's interesting, I said, pulling out my phone and setting it on the table, because I've been wondering about the timing of everything. Talia never showed any interest in Brad until recently. She never questioned our marriage until this year. It's almost like someone was encouraging her to explore her options. Nikki's smile faltered slightly. People change, Ethan. They grow. Sometimes they outgrow their situations. Or sometimes they get pushed, I countered. Tell me, how long have you been planning this? I don't know what you mean. Sure you do. You worked for our company 3 years ago. You had a relationship with Dana Bishop. You were fired for corporate espionage, but you told everyone it was harassment. You've been nursing a grudge ever since. Her face went pale. You're delusional. Am I? Because I have evidence that says otherwise? Phone records showing calls between you and Dana going back months? Financial records showing payments from Retail Solutions, Inc. to shell companies you control? Surveillance photos of you meeting with competitors? I was bluffing about most of it, but her reaction told me I was on the right track. You can't prove anything, she said, but her voice was shaky. Can't I? I leaned forward. Here's what I think happened. You seduced Dana 3 years ago to get access to company secrets. When she found out you were selling information, she had you fired. You've been planning your revenge ever since. That's ridiculous. You targeted my wife because she was vulnerable and connected to both the retail division and Dana's department through me. You encouraged her affair with Brad to create maximum scandal. You probably even suggested she confess to me that night, knowing I'd eventually lose it and make a public scene. Nikki was gripping her martini glass so hard her knuckles were white. Even if that were true, which it's not, what are you going to do about it? Everyone already thinks you're a psycho after your little performance at the gala. You're right, I said. I probably am a little psycho at this point, which is why you're going to do exactly what I tell you to do. Or what? I smiled and picked up my phone. Or I release this conversation to your current employer, along with evidence of your corporate espionage. I also send it to Dana, who I'm sure would love to know that her current troubles are all part of your revenge plot. And just for fun, I post it on social media and tag everyone who was at the gala. You're recording this? I'm always recording these days. It's amazing what people will admit when they think they're safe. She lunged for my phone, but I was faster. Years of boxing had given me good reflexes, and I caught her wrist before she could grab it. "Let go of me!" she screamed, loud enough to attract attention from other tables. "Gladly," I said, releasing her arm. "But first, you're going to admit what you did, on camera, or I'm going to make your life very, very complicated." She looked around at the other patrons, all of whom were now staring at our table. The bartender was reaching for the phone, probably to call security. "Fine," she hissed. "You want the truth? Yes, I set this up. Yes, I manipulated Talia into having those affairs. Yes, I wanted to destroy Dana's career and your pathetic marriage. You're all so predictable, so easy to manipulate. Talia was desperate for excitement, Dana was terrified of exposure, and you were the perfect angry husband just waiting to explode. Why? Because they destroyed my life. Dana used me and threw me away when I became inconvenient. Your wife got the promotion that should have been mine. You got the respect that I earned, so I decided to take it all away from you, just like it was taken from me. And Brad? A useful idiot, like I said. Men are so predictable when you stroke their egos. I stopped the recording and stood up. Thank you, Nikki. That's exactly what I needed. You bastard, she said, but there was defeat in her voice now. No, I replied. I'm just better at this game than you thought. Security arrived as I was leaving, but I was already walking out the front door. Behind me, I could hear Nikki trying to explain to the bouncer why she'd been screaming about corporate espionage and revenge plots. By the time I got home, I'd already forwarded the recording to HR, Dana's personal email, and Retail Solutions Inc.'s corporate headquarters. I also sent copies to the local business journal and the state attorney general's office, since corporate espionage was a felony. The dominoes were falling exactly as planned. The abandoned Hartley manufacturing plant had been closed for 5 years, a victim of overseas competition and corporate downsizing. It sat on the edge of town like a monument to better times, all broken windows and rusted steel. It was also the perfect place for a final confrontation. I'd sent each of them the same message from different burner phones. I have evidence that will clear your name. Meet me at the old Hartley plant tonight at 10 p.m. Come alone, and this all goes away. It was a lie, of course, but desperate people believe what they want to believe. I arrived early and set up in the old supervisor's office, which had windows overlooking the main factory floor. I'd brought a portable speaker, some industrial extension cords I'd borrowed from the warehouse, and enough battery-powered work lights to illuminate the scene below. Talia arrived first, picking her way carefully across the debris-strewn floor in heels that were completely inappropriate for urban exploration. She looked around nervously, calling my name. Dana came next, more practically dressed but equally on edge. When she saw Talia, her face went hard. "What are you doing here?" Dana demanded. "I got a message," Talia replied. "Someone said they had evidence to clear my name." So did I. Brad showed up 10 minutes later, looking like he'd been sleeping in his car. His transfer to Fargo had been delayed pending the investigation, leaving him in employment limbo. When he saw the two women, he started backing toward the exit. "This is a setup," he said. Very good, Brad, I said, my voice echoing through the factory courtesy of the speaker system I'd rigged. You always were the smartest one in the room. They all looked up toward the office windows, but the lights I'd positioned made it impossible for them to see me clearly. Ethan? Talia called. Is that you? In the flesh. Well, sort of. I'm up here in the cheap seats, watching the show. What do you want? Dana demanded. I want the truth. All of it. On the record. I held up my phone. I'm streaming this conversation to a private server, with copies going to HR, the state attorney general, and a few journalists I've been talking to. So I suggest you start being honest for once in your lives. You can't force us to say anything, Brad said. Can I? I flipped a switch, and the lights around him went out, leaving him in darkness. Oops. Electrical problems. This old place isn't very safe, you know. Lots of hazards, exposed wiring, unstable floors, broken glass everywhere. This is kidnapping, Talia shouted. Is it? Because I'm pretty sure you all came here voluntarily. The doors aren't locked. You're free to leave any time. But if you do, tomorrow morning everyone in the city is going to read about your little conspiracy in the business section. I paused, letting that sink in. Or, you can tell the truth. Right here, right now. Confess your sins, as it were. And maybe, just maybe, I'll consider keeping some of the details private. What details? Dana asked. Well, for starters, the fact that this whole thing was orchestrated by Nikki Chen as revenge against Dana for having her fired 3 years ago. The fact that she's been blackmailing Dana and manipulating Talia. The fact that Brad's involvement was just collateral damage in a much larger scheme. I could see them looking at each other, pieces falling into place. That's impossible, Talia said, but her voice was uncertain. Is it? Think about it, Talia. When did you start questioning our marriage? Right around the time Nikki became your best friend. When did you start thinking about Brad again? After Nikki kept bringing him up. When did you start getting close to Dana? After Nikki suggested you needed a mentor in retail management. She wouldn't do that, Talia protested, but she was wavering. She already confessed, I said. I have it on video. She admitted to manipulating all of you. She used your insecurities, your ambitions, your weaknesses. She played you like puppets. Even if that's true, Dana said, it doesn't excuse what we did. We made our own choices. Finally, some honesty from the Ice Queen. You're right, Dana. You did make your own choices. You chose to abuse your position. You chose to manipulate your employees. You chose to destroy a marriage for your own gratification. It wasn't like that, she said. Then what was it like? Explain it to me. Explain to the recording. Explain to the investigators who are going to hear this tomorrow. Dana looked at Talia, then at Brad, then up toward my hiding spot. It started as blackmail. Nikki had photos from when we were together 3 years ago. She threatened to release them unless I played along with her scheme. What kind of photos? Compromising ones, the kind that would end my career. So you decided to end mine instead? I thought if I gave her what she wanted, she'd go away. But she kept asking for more access, more information, more involvement with Talia. And you, Talia, what's your excuse? My wife was crying now, mascara streaking down her cheeks. I felt trapped, like my life was over at 37, like I'd never done anything exciting or dangerous. Nikki kept telling me I deserved better, that I was wasting my life with someone boring. So you decided to destroy our marriage instead of talking to me about it. I tried to talk to you, but you were always working, always fixing something, always busy with your projects. I felt invisible. And screwing my boss and your ex-boyfriend was the solution? I thought if I could make you jealous, if I could make you fight for me, maybe we could find our way back to each other. By sleeping with other people? It sounds insane when you say it like that. It sounds insane because it is insane. Brad had been quiet through all of this, but now he spoke up. Look, I know I screwed up. I was going through a divorce, I was drinking too much, And when Talia reached out, I don't know what I thought. You thought you could relive your college glory days by banging another man's wife? Yeah, pretty much. At least he was honest. Here's what's going to happen, I said. Dana, you're going to resign from the company effective immediately. You're going to forfeit your pension and any severance pay. And you're going to write a full confession detailing Nikki's blackmail scheme and your own poor judgment. I can't do that. I'll never work in corporate management again. You're never going to work in corporate management again anyway. The only question is whether you go out with some dignity or get dragged out in handcuffs when the Attorney General files charges. She was quiet for a long moment. Fine. Brad, you're going to take that transfer to Fargo and keep your mouth shut. You're also going to pay child support to your ex-wife without complaint, and you're going to stay away from married women for the rest of your pathetic life. Agreed. And Talia. I looked down at my wife of 12 years, the woman I'd built a life with, the woman who'd thrown it all away for excitement and adventure. You're going to sign divorce papers. No alimony, no property settlement, no claims on my pension or assets. You're going to disappear from my life as completely as possible. Ethan, please. Can't we try to work this out? I know I made mistakes, but… Mistakes? I laughed, a sound with no humor in it. Talia, you didn't make mistakes. You made choices. Deliberate, calculated choices to betray our marriage, spend our money on your affairs, and humiliate me in front of everyone we know. Those aren't mistakes. That's character. But I love you. No, you don't. You love the security I provided. You love the house I bought. You love the lifestyle my salary made possible. But you don't love me. Because if you did, you never could have done what you did. The factory fell silent, except for the hum of the work lights and the distant sound of traffic on the highway. Do we have a deal? I asked. One by one, they agreed. Dana first, her corporate instincts recognizing a negotiated settlement when she saw one. Brad next, probably just grateful to avoid criminal charges. Finally Talia, her voice barely a whisper. Good, I said. Now get out. All of you. I never want to see any of you again. They filed out like defeated soldiers, leaving me alone in the abandoned factory with my victory and my rage. I sat in the supervisor's office for a long time after they left, looking out over the empty factory floor where my marriage had finally, officially, faded. My phone buzzed with a text from Danny, my PI friend. Nikki Chen was arrested an hour ago, corporate espionage charges. Looks like she won't be manipulating anyone for a while. I smiled for the first time in weeks. Not a happy smile, but a satisfied one. They'd called me boring, predictable, safe. They'd thought they could manipulate me, use me, discard me when I became inconvenient. They were wrong. I wasn't boring. I was methodical. I wasn't predictable. I was strategic. I wasn't safe. I was dangerous. And now they knew it.